Yeah, I'm losing my
Interest
head.
rates here. Why are interest rates rising? And what's actually funny about this, Errol, is interest rates are rising in the 2-year, 10-year, and 30-year Treasury.
Mhm.
Those yields are increasing, and those fluctuate. They fluctuate continuously, right? As people
Yeah.
buy and sell bonds and notes, those Treasury interest rates fluctuate. But what's funny is the Fed funds rate, what the Fed operates around and what they can change, has actually not risen yet. They have yet to have a meeting to hike that interest rate off of 0%. So a lot of interest rates are rising. The projection for that Fed funds rate is through the roof, but they haven't actually hiked yet. Kind of funny, right?
Yeah. So you're saying they're all talk so far.
The market is a little all talk so far. I mean, this is one of those scenarios, Errol, where I'm believing a lot of the talk, but you'll see where we conclude where the trade is how much of the talk you believe in. That's kind of the game here in trading interest rate futures. And I want to just get you up to speed with where we've been and where we are now, and then leave off with where we could go and where everybody can trade around. Interest rates highest they've been since 2019. And you can see here why I love interest rates. I love yield markets is they almost always, since the beginning of the US Treasury and everything else, have existed in an environment. And today we're looking at the 2-year duration, but you can apply this to 5-year, 10-year, 30-year durations, what have you. They almost always live in this environment of like 0% interest rate up to, 5, 6, 7, 10% interest rates. It's kind of beautiful to have a market that has a true historical range that, or a boundary that it lives inside of, unlike stocks, right? Kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Why would this move on the 2-year not seem obvious to a seasoned trader when rates are 0? Like we know we might have to rate. Is something like that not obvious? I know hindsight's 2020, but where are we going there?
Honestly, so Frank has made a good amount of poor trades in the last couple of weeks, especially. But one thing that I have to toot my horn about is to your point, yes and no. And let me dig into that. Because when rates are at 0, and let's just dig into it here, economic growth is slow. Markets are slowing down. There's fear in the market. And you can see the most recent cause for fear was the pandemic and it really ramping up in the start of 2020, all the unknowns around it. Economic growth slows, Errol. Fed tends to move interest rates down to 0% in that Fed funds rate. The 2-year, the 10-year, all the durations tend to follow it down close to those lows. Now, to your question, it's a tough one because in hindsight, you would say, well, why the hell wouldn't I just be inventorying as many long yields as I can at 0? And it was me and my good friend Peter Momet when we were down there, and we're down there for a stretch. Like we were down at 0 for, I think, a full year before we see the rise that we've seen in the last couple of months. When you're down there, there's all the talk and all the articles coming out of like, oh, we're going negative. Like interest rates for the first time in the US are going negative. And to those people's credit, interest rates were negative in places like Japan. In some places in the Eurozone, they were showing negative rates. But that is the kind of, Errol, to your point, it seems like, oh, I should just be buying all the zeros as I wanted to when we were down there. But the fear is, oh, it could go negative. Now, me being a high probability guy, I tend to do the thing when stuff is crazy. I want to do the thing that's like, oh, this is what usually happens. We were buying these yields down at 0. But there definitely was the risk of this thing going down to negative territory. So there is risk there, I would say still.
No, that makes sense. Now what's kind of going through my head is I know the market is kind of bouncing back a little. The 2 years rising. Is this now creating range again to the downside on the 2-year because we're coming back up from 0?
So that is like the crux of today's kind of closing question. The starting question being, why are interest rates rising? You see this huge move here to Errol's point. You're seeing them bounce back huge. In the latter part of 2021, they're starting to lift off of zero, Errol. Mm-hmm. Since the start of 2022, it's been almost a straight shot. I mean, this market is literally, these futures are up over 1,000 percentage points. If you had bought one back at the start of 2021, 1,000 percentage point move in this futures market. Why is it moving higher? Because of this inflation fear. Also, the economy seems to be operating in a lot healthier way than it was at the start of the pandemic. So the Fed is looking to probably hike rates. And the reason why it's really gotten rapid, though, why it's moving so fast to the upside, why are interest rates rising so fast, is because this is what the Fed has to do. It's really a thankless job and a tough one. I'll give them at that. Where it's like they have to toe a line of like, okay, we reduce rates, Errol, to make it easy for people to borrow so that more money can move around, so that we promote growth in times of fear in the market. But if you don't act and then hike rates when you're starting to see that growth, then money is flying around almost too much. Inflation is ripping through the roof. That's what we're seeing now. And you see these yield markets and the futures around them rising very, very fast, because everybody's projecting that they have to come in, step in, and do a lot of hiking to combat that rising inflation.
Is such a move like this sustainable in such a short period of time?
That's what I'm on the other side of, is this does seem like a lot in a short period of time. And that's why, everybody's got their own opinions and their own portfolios and everything.
I'm asking you like you have a crystal ball.
Yeah. No, next week it'll be back down to $10. I have no clue, but I do tend to side with you. You and I kind of park our cars in the same garage, in that we're both contrarians. We both like to look at outliers like this and say, hey, this is a lot really soon. But that being said, I have shorts from 11 and 12 here, which is 1.1%, 1.2% in the 2-year yield. And the market's moved through me, and I've been wrong up until now. The market can go wherever it wants, Errol. But yeah, I am on the other side of like, this is rising rates. It was inevitable from zero here, but now rising to the tune of today, 20 basis points in one day. That's a full rate hike from the Fed. They tend to hike in 25 basis point increments. Now they're talking about 50 basis point hikes in single meetings and everything else. So this does seem just like an outlier move that, at least in the short term, I want to get on the other side of. But keep in mind that, 2-year yields as recently as 2019, the early part of 2019, were at 2% or 2.5%. They can definitely go higher. And so make sure if you are short to mitigate some of that risk, or, take losses when relevant. Because right now, market is saying 1.5% of hikes in the next year or so. The 2-year can kind of give us a gauge for short-term rates in the next year to year and a half, 2 years duration. And your trade from here on out is, do you think that 1.5% worth of hikes between now and let's call it a year from now is too much or not enough? And if you think it's too much, you sell. If you think it's not enough, then you buy.
Yeah, I'm listening. I hear you, Frank. It's going to be interesting. I'm probably going to put the short position on because I like to just go with the data. Of course, it could keep going, but stick with the data on this one and manage the risk if need be.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm glad you always ask the best questions, Errol. I absolutely love having you here on the program. And I know people on Twitter and elsewhere do enjoy it as well. Make sure to follow Errol on Twitter and watch today's assignment here on the Tasty Trade Network. One quick thing before we get out of here. I got some great feedback from one of our community members around the fact that we are running